I came out of the bathroom with my hands still damp, and I saw her fingers inside the cooling chocolate custard. Not a spoon, not a quick taste from the surface. Her fingertips were in the jar like she owned it, like it was meant for her. The timer on the counter kept ticking, loud enough that it felt like a warning. That custard was not dessert. It was a wedding order. I froze in the doorway because my brain did the math before my mouth could. If her fingers went in, the whole batch became a risk. Not a small risk. A real one. My sister's bakery name was going to sit on that cake, and a couple was going to cut into it in front of a room full of guests. I had been watching my sister get squeezed by deadlines for weeks. I had promised her I would not be another problem. My sister owned a small bakery, the kind that lived and died on word of mouth. She was only 23, but she carried herself like someone older because she had to. Lately, her messages came in short bursts, like she was typing while walking. "Can you do fillings tonight? We are short again. I am behind." I could hear it in her voice when she called. Her breath sounded tight, like she had been running without moving. She told me 2 people had quit in the same month and another person kept calling out. There was no cushion. When a big order came in, especially weddings, it was not just a cake. It was schedules, deliveries, and a couple's money and trust all tied together. She said the wedding clients were the hardest because they did not want excuses. They wanted perfect. I could not bake the full cakes like she did, but I could take work off her hands. Fillings were the kind of job that stole time and attention. Custards, curds, marmalades. They needed heat control, clean containers, careful cooling. They also had to be safe. If you made a mistake, you did not just lose ingredients. You lost a day you could not replace. So I turned my kitchen into a production line. I cleared the counters and set out sanitized jars like I was in a shop instead of my home. I wrote dates on lids. I ran loads through the dishwasher and wiped surfaces twice because I could not stand the idea of giving my sister something questionable. When I worked fast, and I did not stop to snack. I kept thinking about her tired eyes and her voice saying, "I just need help." At first it felt simple. I would cook, seal, chill, and drive everything over in the morning. I told myself it was clean work, quiet work, the kind of help that mattered. But the moment I brought the first jar out to cool, my girlfriend looked at it like it was made for her. She did not ask what it was for. She did not ask if she could have some. She just smiled, reached in like it was normal, and licked her fingers like a child. I corrected her the first time. I explained contamination, how skin and saliva could spoil a batch, how a customer could get sick. I even offered an easy fix. If you want to taste it, use a spoon. I will give you your own spoon every time. She laughed like I was being dramatic and told me she liked using her fingers because it reminded her of being young, sneaking sweets from the kitchen. The plan had sounded simple. Help my sister, save time, keep the bakery moving, until someone in my home treated my sister's wedding work like a snack. The first time it happened, I told myself it was a mistake. I had poured warm marmalade into 2 clean jars and set them on the counter to cool, lids off so they would not trap steam. I turned my back for maybe 10 seconds to rinse the pot. When I looked again, my girlfriend stood there with her hand over the open jar, her index finger shining orange. She licked it slowly and smiled at me like she had found a harmless secret. I stopped her and kept my voice calm. I said that jar was for my sister's bakery. I said people paid for this and it needed to stay clean. She shrugged, like I had warned her not to touch wet paint. She said it was just a taste. I handed her a spoon and said, "Next time use this." She nodded, but her eyes stayed on the jar, not on me. I remade the marmalade anyway. Not because I thought she was sick, but because I could not prove she was not. And because I pictured a wedding guest, a child, an older person, anyone, eating it. The cost was not huge, but the time was. I lost an hour I did not have, standing over heat again, stirring, watching bubbles, trying to get the same texture twice in one night. My sister texted, "Thank you, you are saving me." I did not tell her I had made it twice. The second time came with custard, and it felt worse because custard was more fragile. Milk and eggs, heat. One mistake and it curdled. I had strained it into a bowl, covered it, and set it in the fridge to cool. I came back with labels and a marker, and she had already lifted the cover. Her finger had left a neat line through the surface, like a child drawing in sand. I heard myself say her name in a way that sounded like a warning. She did not even flinch. She said, "It is so good." She said she had missed eating things like this, straight from the bowl. I told her again, use a spoon. I offered to pour a small portion into a separate cup just for her. She shook her head and said a spoon ruined it. She said finger tasting reminded her of being little, standing in her grandmother's kitchen, feeling safe. I wanted to be patient with that. I did not want to be the guy who crushed a small comfort. But it was not her comfort to take. It was my sister's work, and it was someone else's order. The third time happened after I had already warned her before I started cooking. I told her I was making fillings and I needed the kitchen to be treated like a workspace. She agreed too fast. Her voice sounded sweet, but her eyes looked bored. When the jar cooled on the counter, I watched her drift closer like it pulled her in. I saw her glance at the spoon sitting right beside it. I saw her ignore it. She dipped 2 fingers, not one, like she wanted more than a taste. That time I did not explain contamination. I had already done that. I just stared at the jar and felt heat crawl up my neck. She said, "Come on," I barely touched it. She said I was acting like she had poisoned it. I took the jar to the sink and dumped it out while she watched, and something in her face hardened. It was not guilt. It was insult, like I had thrown away a gift. The fourth time was the worst before the worst, because it happened right after I tried to compromise. I had poured a small spoonful into a separate ramekin and placed it in front of her like an offering. I said, "Here, this one is yours. The jar stays closed." She looked at the ramekin, then at the jar, and she laughed under her breath. She said it was not the same. She said she liked the feeling of doing it the old way. Then she reached around the ramekin and touched the jar anyway, quick and sneaky, like if she was fast enough it would not count. So far it had happened 4 times. Same jar, same fingers, same remake. Each time I told myself the message had finally landed. Each time I watched her do it again with the same calm confidence, like my boundary was not real until I enforced it. And I could not enforce it without turning my own kitchen into a fight. Then came the day when time mattered most. My sister called that morning and did not even say hello the normal way. Her voice sounded thin and tight, like she had been holding it back all night. She told me the wedding cake order had moved up because the client wanted an earlier pickup. She said her assistant had not shown up again. She said she had tears cooling, buttercream splitting, and she still needed chocolate custard filling, a lot of it, smooth and stable. Then she paused like she hated asking. She said, "Please do not mess this one up. This client mattered." She did not say why, but I understood. A wedding cake was not just one sale. It was photos, reviews, and the kind of talk that could keep a small bakery alive or kill it slowly. I told her I would handle it. The second I ended the call, my kitchen stopped feeling like my home. It became her back room. I pulled out eggs and milk, cocoa, sugar, cornstarch, a clean strainer, clean jars. I lined everything up in order because my head needed a path. Heat, whisk, temper, back on the stove, stir until it thickened. No lumps, no scorch. I kept seeing my sister's hands shaking while she piped borders late at night. I kept hearing her say the client mattered. My girlfriend came in while I worked. She leaned on the doorway and watched the pot like it was entertainment. I did not have patience left for guessing games. I looked at her and said it straight before the custard was even done. I told her this batch was for my sister's wedding order. I told her not to eat it. I did not say it like a joke. I did not say it like a suggestion. I said it like a rule because it was not for us. I reminded her about contamination and how I had already remade fillings 4 times. I said if she truly needed to taste it, she had to use a spoon and she had to scoop from a separate portion, not the jar. She rolled her eyes, but she nodded. She said, "Fine." She said I was acting like a food safety inspector. I did not argue, I kept stirring. When the custard finally turned glossy and heavy, I took it off the heat and strained it, slow and careful. I poured it into a jar and set it on the counter to cool. I wiped the rim. I covered it tight. I pushed a spoon into a mug right beside it, almost like placing a warning sign. Then I pointed at the spoon and said again, if you touch anything, use that. Not your fingers, not even once. She gave me a look that felt like she was being punished for something small. She said she understood. She said I was being intense. I told her I had to be intense because my sister did not get a second chance with this client. I tried to remove every excuse. The jar was closed. The spoon was out. The instructions were clear. But the custard still needed time and I still had to step away. I went to the bathroom because I could feel my own nerves turning sharp. The custard sat on the counter, sealed and cooling, and the kitchen still smelled like cocoa and heat. My sister texted again while I walked away. Any update? She needs it by noon. I stared at the message and felt my stomach drop because noon was not a soft deadline. Noon was a door closing. I told myself I needed 5 minutes to reset. I needed to wash off the sweat and the smell of the stove, and I needed my hands steady. When I helped my sister, I had to act like her employee, not like a boyfriend in his own home. That meant no drama, no arguments, no distractions, just clean work delivered on time. Before I turned on the shower, I went back to the kitchen one more time. I checked the jar like it was evidence. Lid tight, label ready, spoon in the mug right beside it. I looked at my girlfriend and repeated it, slower than before. I said the custard was not for us. I said it went to the bakery. I said if she absolutely needed to taste it, she had to use the spoon and she had to take it from a separate scoop, not from the jar. I even pointed to the spoon again, like a teacher pointing at a rule on a wall. She stood there in her bare feet, arms folded, watching me like I was being unreasonable. She said she got it. She said she was not a child. She said she was not going to ruin anything. Her tone sounded calm, but it also sounded like she was tired of hearing me talk. That was the split I kept feeling between us. In my head, the kitchen turned into my sister's bakery. Every surface had a purpose. Every minute had a cost. In her head, the kitchen stayed soft and personal. It smelled good. It felt familiar. It was comfort. I did not think she meant harm. I thought she did not believe harm existed. I stepped into the shower and let the water hit my shoulders hard. I tried to let the noise drown out the timer ticking in my head. I pictured my sister lifting cake layers, checking her phone, waiting for my delivery. I pictured her trying to smile at a wedding client while her hands shook from too much work. I washed fast. I did not relax. I counted in my mind without meaning to. 1 minute, 2 minutes. I told myself it was fine. The jar was closed. The spoon was out. The boundary was clear. No one would touch it in the time it took me to rinse and dry off. Even then, I still listened. Through the water and the fan, I thought I heard movement in the kitchen. A cabinet door, maybe. A small clink, like glass on stone. My mind tried to ignore it because I did not want to be paranoid in my own house. I told myself she was getting a cup. I told myself she was doing anything except the one thing I had asked her not to do. When I turned off the water, the silence felt heavier than it should have. I dried my hands too carefully, like I needed control somewhere. I walked back down the hall, already rehearsing what I would say if she had touched it. Something calm, something fair, something that did not turn into a fight. I stepped into the kitchen. The custard jar sat where I left it, but the mug beside it looked wrong. When I came back, I did not see a spoon. I stood in the kitchen doorway and scanned the counter the way I always did when I was making something for my sister. Jar, lid, label, spoon. My eyes went straight to the mug first, and the empty space inside it felt loud. The spoon was gone. The jar sat a little closer to the edge than I remembered, like it had been pulled forward and set back in a hurry. The lid was not on tight. It was resting crooked, not sealed, like someone had placed it there to pretend it was closed. A thin smear of dark custard marked the rim. I did not speak yet. I just walked closer, slow, like the floor might shift under me if I moved too fast. The kitchen smelled sweeter now, less like cooking and more like something being eaten. My stomach tightened because I already knew what I was about to see, and I still hoped I was wrong. My girlfriend stood on the other side of the counter. She held the jar in one hand, angled toward her. Her other hand hovered over it and her fingers dipped in with a small, practiced motion. Not a panic touch. Not an accident. It looked familiar, like a habit she had done 1,000 times. For a second I could not move. I watched her pull her fingers out slowly, glossy and brown, and bring them to her mouth. She closed her eyes as she tasted, like it was a comfort she had earned. Then she noticed me and froze mid-lick, like a kid caught in the act. The silence between us stretched, the fridge hummed, the clock over the stove ticked, the jar sat open in her hand like proof. My brain did not go to anger first. It went to numbers. How long would it take to remake? How long to cool? How soon did I have to leave to reach the bakery before my sister's client arrived? I pictured my sister checking the front door every 5 minutes, trying to keep her smile steady. I pictured her saying, "I am so sorry, we are still waiting on the filling," like that was a normal sentence to tell someone picking up a wedding cake. I looked at my phone on the counter and saw my sister's last message still sitting there. Any update? She needs it by noon. My hand twitched like I wanted to answer, but I had nothing safe to tell her. I forced myself to keep my voice low, like that would keep the situation under control. I asked, "Did you use the spoon?" My girlfriend glanced toward the sink and my eyes followed. The spoon lay there, wet like it had been rinsed fast and dropped. It was not in the jar. It was not even close. She had still used her fingers. She sighed like I was the one making it difficult. She said she had only taken a tiny bit. She said she had washed her hands. She said she had not thought it mattered because the custard was hot earlier, like heat erased everything. She said she just wanted a taste, and she missed doing it this way. I stared at her fingers, still shiny at the tips. All I could think about was the 4 other times. The same smile, the same tiny bit, the same excuse. And the same result, me throwing out my work and starting again because I could not gamble with someone else's food. This was not about chocolate custard anymore. It was about a clear boundary that kept getting stepped over like it was a joke. It was about my sister trusting me to protect her business, and me failing because I could not get one simple request respected in my own home. My chest felt tight, like I had been holding air in without noticing. I heard myself inhale, sharp and fast. My thoughts rushed ahead of my control, and I felt something inside me snap from careful to desperate. I tried to swallow it down, but my frustration turned into words before I could stop it. My voice rose before I chose it. It came out sharp and loud, the kind of sound that did not fit inside a small kitchen. I yelled at her to stop eating it. I yelled that it was not for her. I yelled that she had contaminated it again. The words sounded rougher than they did in my head, like they had been waiting behind my teeth for days. In that moment I did not see my girlfriend first. I saw my sister's bakery. I saw wedding boxes stacked near a back door. I saw my sister checking her phone, trying to act calm while her hands moved too fast. I saw my own promise to her, that I would help and not make things harder. Then I saw my girlfriend's fingers in the jar, and it felt like she had chosen her comfort over everything I had explained, over all 4 remakes, over the one clear rule I had repeated 5 minutes earlier. This was the 5th repeat of the same problem, and it happened on the worst possible day. I heard the anger in my voice and I hated it, but I also felt trapped by it. It was not just the custard. It was the time. It was the ingredients. It was the pressure of a deadline that did not care about feelings. It was the fact that I had tried gentle. I had tried explaining. I had tried offering a separate portion. I had tried making it easy. And still, the same thing had happened again, like my words had no weight in my own home. When I yelled, her face changed fast. The playful look vanished and her eyes widened like I had hit something tender. Her shoulders pulled in. The jar in her hand tilted slightly, and for a second I thought it might fall. I reached out without thinking, not to touch her, but to steady the jar. I stopped myself at the last second because I did not want my hands anywhere near it now. I did not want to make it worse. The kitchen felt smaller after I raised my voice. The air felt thick, like it held the sound. My heart kept beating too hard and my mouth felt dry. I wanted to rewind 10 seconds and speak like a normal person. I wanted to say it calmly, one more time, like calm had ever worked. But I also felt this hard, stubborn thing in my chest that said I had been ignored on purpose, and that if I softened again, nothing would change. I looked at the jar and knew I could not send it to my sister. I could not pretend it was fine. I could not gamble with someone else's food, not for a wedding, not for my sister's reputation. The thought of dumping it out made my stomach twist, because it meant starting over with almost no time left. The thought of delivering it anyway made me feel sick in a different way. My girlfriend stood very still, and I could see her breathing change, fast and uneven. She looked at me like I had become someone else in front of her. I knew my tone had been harsh. I knew I had sounded like I was scolding, not just correcting. I could almost hear how it would replay in her head later, louder than the reason behind it. I tried to pull myself back. I tried to make my face softer, but my fear stayed on my skin and my anger stayed in my throat. I had yelled because I felt disrespected, yes, but I had also yelled because I felt helpless. I had needed her to understand that this was work and it mattered, and in the only moment I stepped away, she had touched it anyway. I thought the fight was about contamination and deadlines. But the argument did not stay about custard for long. The sound of my yelling faded, but the pressure stayed in the air. My girlfriend stared at me for a few seconds like she tried to decide if I was serious, or if I was going to laugh and tell her it was a joke. When she realized I was serious, her mouth tightened. Her eyes got wet fast, like a switch flipped inside her. She set the jar down too hard on the counter. Custard clung to the rim and slowly slid, leaving a dark line. I noticed stupid details like that because my brain still treated it like a work problem I had to fix. But she did not look at the jar anymore. She looked at me like I had done something cruel. Her breathing turned uneven. Tears ran down her face in quick lines, and the shame on her expression hit me harder than the mess. I had expected anger back. I had expected an argument about spoons or hygiene or why I was being strict. I had not expected her to look small, like I had taken something from her. Then she accused me of fat-shaming her. The word landed wrong in the room, like it did not belong with anything that had just happened. My throat went tight again, but this time it was confusion, not rage. In my head I replayed what I had said. I had yelled for her to stop eating it. I had said it was not for her. I had said she contaminated it. I had not said anything about her body. I had not even thought about her weight. That was the problem. She heard stop eating and she heard a judgment about her, not a boundary about my sister's order. The kitchen felt even smaller after that, like there was no space left for the real issue. I could almost feel the argument shifting under my feet, turning from facts into identity. I tried to respond carefully, but my face still held the anger I had just shown her. I could not control how I looked. My heart still raced. I probably looked like I was ready to fight, even when I was trying to understand. The gap between my intent and her hurt felt huge, and it made me feel helpless again. As far as I knew, she had no history with food issues. She had never told me about dieting or shame or anyone policing her eating. She had never asked me to avoid certain words. That did not mean the feelings were not real. It just meant I did not see them coming, and now they filled the whole room. She cried harder, like my silence proved her point. She kept wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand, smearing custard a little, and I hated that detail too because it made everything feel messy and childish. I wanted to say I was sorry for yelling. I wanted to say she still could not touch the jar. I wanted to say both things at once, and I knew it would sound like I was still blaming her. The jar sat between us like a witness. My phone buzzed again somewhere on the counter, and I did not even look. I could not handle my sister and my girlfriend at the same time. The fight had stopped being about hygiene. It had become something else, something sharp and personal. Now the question was not only who touched the custard, it was what kind of person I was. My phone buzzed again, and the sound cut through her crying like a reminder that time did not pause for us. I glanced at the screen and saw my sister's name. I did not open it right away because I felt trapped between two fires. One was the wedding order that had to be delivered. The other was the look on my girlfriend's face, like I had just revealed something ugly about myself. There were two problems at once: the order deadline and the relationship blow up. I told my girlfriend I had not meant anything about her body. I tried to keep my voice low, but it still sounded tight. I explained again that this was for my sister, for a client, and that fingers in the jar meant I could not use it. Even as I said it, I heard how it sounded. It sounded like I cared more about a jar than her feelings, because I was still talking about the jar. She shook her head and wiped her cheeks hard. Her eyes looked angry now, not just hurt. She acted like my explanation was just another way to blame her. She said I had humiliated her. She said I had made her feel disgusting. She looked at the custard and then back at me, like the custard was proof that I saw her as a problem. I stood there with my hands open at my sides, like showing empty hands could prove I had not been trying to hurt her. But my body still held the stress of the deadline. My sister was waiting. The wedding client was waiting. I could almost see the clock over the stove even when I did not look at it. I picked up the jar and stared at it, trying to make a decision I hated. I could dump it and start again, but I knew it would not cool in time unless I rushed it in ways that might ruin the texture. I could deliver it anyway and gamble with someone else's food safety, and that felt wrong. I could call my sister and admit I failed, and that felt worse. My girlfriend watched me handle the jar like it mattered more than her, and her face hardened. She turned her shoulders away from me and crossed her arms, like she needed armor. The kitchen got cold even though the air was warm. I finally opened my sister's message. She asked if I was on my way. My thumbs hovered over the keyboard and I felt my pulse in my fingertips. I could not type the truth without making it real. I could not say I had it done because I did not. I could not say it got contaminated again because that would sound like an excuse. I told my sister I was running a little behind. I hated myself for that line because it was small and polite, and the situation was not small and polite. It was a disaster that was spreading. Behind me, my girlfriend sniffed and took a shaky breath, like she was trying to stop crying but could not stop being furious. She said something about how I always took my sister's side, like this had been a test I failed on purpose. That hit me in a different way because I had not seen it as sides. I had seen it as right and wrong, food safety and not food safety, respect and not respect. I wanted to say I would have done the same thing for anyone, not just my sister. But the truth was I was more afraid of letting my sister down than I was of having an uncomfortable talk with my girlfriend. My priorities showed, even when I did not speak them. I looked at the custard again and realized I was going to have to remake it. There was no other choice if I wanted to be able to look my sister in the eye. I reached for a clean pot, and my girlfriend made a small sound like disbelief, like I had chosen work over her tears. The tension in the room stopped being loud and became heavy. I could feel her waiting for an apology, and I could feel the clock pushing me forward. I had to fix the order, but I also had to face what I had done with my voice. Even if the custard was remade, the words could not be unmixed. I kept staring at that jar like it held the whole argument inside it. To her, it looked like a snack. To me, it looked like a product with someone else's name on it. A wedding client did not agree to eat something my girlfriend had dipped her fingers into, even if she insisted her hands were clean. My sister did not agree to deliver something that might make a stranger sick, and I did not agree to keep remaking the same thing because one request never stuck. That was the part I could not make her understand. It was not the tasting by itself. It was the pattern. The same boundary, crossed again and again, until it stopped feeling like a mistake and started feeling like a choice. I had explained it in every way I knew. I talked about hygiene. I talked about liability. I talked about how my sister's bakery depended on trust. I even offered a spoon like that solved everything. But my girlfriend treated the spoon like an insult. She treated it like I was trying to police her, not protect the food. She kept going back to the same reason, the childhood comfort of using her fingers. She said it made her feel safe. She said it reminded her of being a kid in her family's kitchen. I believed that was real for her. I also saw how that nostalgia became a shield. It turned a simple rule into something she did not have to respect because her feelings felt more important than the consequences. And then there was my side, which did not sound warm or human when I said it out loud. My side sounded like rules and contamination and deadlines. It sounded like I cared more about a bakery order than her. I could see why she heard my yelling as an attack, because I did not sound like someone protecting a boundary. I sounded like someone trying to control her. The moment she called it fat shaming, the argument changed shape. It stopped being about consent and hygiene and became about her identity and my character. She saw my words as proof that I judged her for eating. I saw her actions as proof that she did not respect what I asked. We were talking about two different injuries, and both of us acted like the other one should be obvious. I knew I had yelled. I knew I had sounded harsh. I did not like the person I heard in that moment. But I also knew I had been pushed to a place where I felt invisible. When someone ignored a boundary once, it felt like a mistake. When they ignored it 5 times, it started to feel like they were testing how serious I was and how much of my work they could treat like it belonged to them. The kitchen being a shared space made it worse. She lived in that space emotionally. I used it like a workstation, with someone else's reputation on the line. I needed her to treat it like a place where certain things were off limits. She needed me to treat it like home. After she cried and accused me, I kept asking myself the same question in circles. Was I right about the custard, but wrong about the yelling? Or was the yelling the only language left after being ignored so many times? Did my reason matter if my delivery hurt her that deeply? I could not get an answer in that room, because everything I said sounded like blame, and everything she said sounded like a verdict. So I turned to the internet for judgment. Was the yelling justified? When I posted the story online, I thought people would focus on the obvious part. Fingers in food meant contamination. Deadline meant pressure. I expected a simple verdict about whether I overreacted. Online, people stopped debating custard and started debating boundaries. One large group came down hard on the boundary itself. They acted like the jar was not just a jar, but a clear line I had drawn that got stepped over 5 times. Their main point was simple. I had told her more than once, and she ignored it anyway. They treated the repeat as the whole story, not one mistake, a pattern. They also kept pulling the focus back to what the custard was for. It was not for the two of us on a couch. It was for customers, and customers never agreed to whatever someone's fingers might carry, even after hand washing. They described it as basic food safety, the kind that should not require debate in a home kitchen when the result went to the public. In their eyes, my girlfriend did not just taste something. She ruined a batch meant for paying clients. That same group framed the 5th time as disrespect, not carelessness. They argued that if someone kept doing the exact thing you asked them not to do, it meant your words did not matter to them. The nostalgia excuse bothered them. They treated it like a story she used to make her want feel more important than my request. The more they talked, the less it sounded like a couple fighting over dessert, and the more it sounded like consent. They summarized it as, I set a rule, she understood it, she chose to break it, and I finally reacted. Another camp agreed with the facts and still criticized me. They said my anger made sense, but my delivery did not. To them, yelling turned a practical boundary into a personal attack. They focused on how humiliating it might have felt to be shouted at over eating, especially in a space that was supposed to be shared. Even if I never meant to comment on her body, they pointed out that yelling about eating could hit deeper than I intended. They also argued that shouting was not a single moment. It was the end of a chain I let build. In their view, if something bothered me 4 times before, then the time to handle it was earlier, when I could still speak like a partner instead of like a supervisor. They saw my outburst as proof that I had been storing frustration and then dumping it all at once. Some of them pushed a more practical solution. If the contamination kept happening, then I should have changed the process instead of expecting the same request to work a 5th time. They suggested that if I truly could not trust her around it, I should have controlled access. Put it away. Cool it somewhere closed. Stay in the room. Treat it like a work product and protect it like one. Their judgment was not that my girlfriend was right. It was that I still held responsibility for how I handled a situation I already knew was risky. Then there was the third camp that barely cared about custard at all. They treated the jar like a symbol and asked what it represented in the relationship. They wondered if my girlfriend was testing limits on purpose, not in a cruel way, but in a childish way. A repeated push to see if I would finally stop being calm and give her a big reaction. They said some people did that when they felt ignored or when they wanted attention during stressful periods. At the same time, they did not let me off the hook. They suggested I might have been carrying my sister's stress like it was mine, and I might have used my girlfriend as the safest place to release it. Not because I hated her, but because I felt responsible and trapped, and I snapped at the closest person. They saw my kitchen turning into a bakery station as part of the problem. The home stopped feeling mutual. It became my job site, and she became someone in the way. That camp kept circling back to the idea that we were arguing about different things. I thought I was defending hygiene and deadlines. She felt judged and shamed. They believed both experiences could be true at the same time, and that the real fix was not a bet her spoon rule. It was a calm conversation about respect, shared space, and what each of us needed when the other one was under pressure. Reading it all made me feel pulled apart. Some comments made my girlfriend sound careless and selfish. Some made me sound harsh and controlling. Some made both of us sound like we were fighting for control of the same space in different languages. And then, buried in the judgment, another group asked a sharper question that made my stomach drop. But then another group asks a sharper question: why can't this be prevented at all? That sharper question opened a new kind of comment. People stopped asking who was right and started asking why I kept setting myself up to lose. They treated the situation like a preventable accident that kept happening because the kitchen stayed wide open. This group sounded less angry and more surgical. They focused on structure. They said I should have separated a small tasting bowl at the start, every time, without waiting for her to ask. If she wanted the comfort of tasting, give her something meant to be eaten and keep the real batch untouched. They argued that a tiny extra step would have saved hours of remaking, and it would have removed the temptation that kept pulling her back to the jar. They also suggested I should have labeled jars clearly as business product, not household food, not as a punishment, but as a visual line. In their eyes, a plain jar on a counter looked like shared property. A labeled jar looked like work. They believed my girlfriend might have acted differently if the message was not only in my voice but on the container in front of her. And they went further. They told me to keep work items out of shared reach during prep, put them away, cover them, use a cooler, use a closed shelf. Do not leave a cooling jar on the counter and expect someone who had already broken the rule 4 times to suddenly change. Their conclusion was not that my girlfriend was innocent. It was that I could reduce opportunity and reduce conflict. If I truly needed a sterile product, I had to protect it like one. Another camp took a harder moral stance, and it made me feel exposed. They said the childhood nostalgia excuse did not matter. They did not deny that comfort could be real. They just believed it was irrelevant when the outcome affected other people. In their view, the reason did not justify the contamination. A habit that felt sweet in a private kitchen became selfish when the food was for customers. They pointed out that nostalgia could be honored without touching the main batch. She could have dipped her finger into a small spoonful I set aside. She could have had her own jar. She could have waited. They described her insistence on fingers, after being told repeatedly, as a way of choosing the feeling over the responsibility. Some of them noticed her reaction after I yelled. They did not read it as pure pain. They read it as a kind of pouting, like the shock of being confronted finally matched the shock I had been swallowing for weeks. They said the fat-shaming accusation looked like a way to redirect blame, whether she meant it that way or not. They called it immature to frame food safety as personal judgment, especially when I never mentioned her body. The harshest versions of those comments said partnership included respecting a partner's work. They argued that if I cared enough to help my sister under pressure, then my girlfriend should have cared enough to follow one simple rule. To them, love was not only comfort, it was restraint. It was treating the other person's responsibilities as real. Then there was a camp that pulled me back toward the center, and it made the whole thing harder. They focused on language and impact. They said that even if I never talked about weight, the phrase I used could still land as shamming. Stop eating did not sound like a hygienic boundary to someone already embarrassed. It sounded like judgment about appetite. It sounded like disgust. They argued that her crying could have been real hurt, not manipulation. A person could break a rule and still feel humiliated when shouted at. A person could be wrong and still be wounded. They reminded me that someone did not need a history of food issues for those words to sting. Embarrassment could create its own meaning in the moment. This group pushed for a specific kind of repair. They said I should apologize for the yelling and for the wording without backing away from the boundary itself. In their view, I could say I was sorry for the way I spoke, while still making it clear that fingers in customer food could not happen again. They treated it like two separate conversations that I had smashed into one about respect and hygiene, one about how I handled anger. Reading those comments, I started to see the trap I was in. If I focused only on the custard, I sounded cold and controlling. If I focused only on her feelings, I looked like I accepted the contamination and the disrespect. The internet did what it always did. It turned my kitchen into a courtroom and my relationship into a case study. And the more I read, the more I realized the real question was not whether I had the right to be upset. The real question was what my next move would teach her, and what it would teach me. If he apologizes for yelling, does that teach respect, or does it teach that the boundary is negotiable? After I read through the comments, I kept coming back to the same memory. Her fingers in the custard, my voice going sharp, her face collapsing like I had slapped her, the jar sitting between us like evidence. At the start it was only custard. Now it was trust, respect, and how we fight. I could admit my tone had been harsh. I had not spoken like a partner in that moment. I had spoken like a person who felt cornered and tried to take control with volume. Even if my point was right, I knew yelling made the room unsafe. It made her feel attacked. And the worst part was that it gave her a new pain to hold onto, something that could live longer than the argument about hygiene. But I also could not pretend the original issue was small. It was not just that she wanted a taste. It was that she kept doing it the same way after I asked her not to. It was food meant for a business order, meant for strangers, meant to protect my sister's reputation. I had been trying to help my family, and I felt like my girlfriend had treated that like a joke, or like my rules were optional if they got in the way of her comfort. When she said I was fat-shaming her, I believed she meant it. I believed she felt shame in that moment, even if I did not put it there on purpose. Intent did not erase impact. I understood that more after I calmed down. But impact also did not erase the pattern. Her hurt did not turn her fingers into a spoon. So if there was a repair to make, it had to be about two things at once. I had to own the yelling, not to win her back to my side, but because I did not want that version of me to become normal. I needed to tell her I was sorry for the way I said it, and I needed to mean it without adding excuses in the same breath. At the same time, she would have needed to hear something she did not want to hear, that the boundary was not a suggestion, that touching a customer product with fingers could not happen again, that nostalgia could exist but not at the cost of someone else's work, that if she wanted a taste, we could set some aside in a separate bowl and that would be hers, but the main batch would be off limits every time without debate. I kept thinking about what each of us wanted from the other. I wanted her to respect my words the first time, not after the fifth. I wanted her to care that my sister was depending on me. I wanted her to treat the kitchen for that hour like a workspace with rules. And she probably wanted something else. She wanted to feel safe in her own home. She wanted to feel like I saw her as my partner, not as a problem to manage. She wanted my frustration to come out as a conversation, not an explosion. And when I yelled stop eating, she wanted to hear I still loved her, not that I judged her. The uncomfortable truth was that both of us had something to change. If nothing changed, the next jar on the counter would not just be dessert. It would be a trigger, a test, a replay waiting to happen. So I left it there, not with a clean answer, but with two questions that mattered to me more than a vote. Was my boundary reasonable that she could not touch a business batch with her fingers, especially after being told multiple times? And was my reaction acceptable, the yelling, the phrasing, the way it landed on her? If you were in my place, which matters more, the reason or the delivery? What would a fair boundary look like in a shared kitchen when one person was doing time-sensitive work for paying customers? Next time there is a jar on the counter, what will change her hands or his temper?